the spectrum of engagement, the range from consultation through engagement to co-production. And we want to, I know you're focusing in more detail on engagement at this meeting, and I've obviously seen the presentation that we're going to have from GOSAD later about their perspectives. One of the things that's at the heart of the council plan, which is our key strategic planning document for this period, was to work to make the council more open, transparent, inclusive. So that was a commitment that you will have seen in the council plan. I'm sure have heard the council administration, our cabinet members and others say. And I think we recognise that there's areas where the council can do better on that. And again, hopefully the presentation from GOSAD, and I'm sure the contributions from other speakers this evening may highlight that. In the report, which has been circulated and which mostly talked to, we've tried to do is give some practical examples of work the council has or is doing to try and embody that approach to learn to engage more openly at an earlier stage in the policy making cycle, to try and do that with a greater effort at practical tools to reach a more diverse range of respondents, and really critically to act on that feedback and embed that feedback in the decisions that the council makes. So I'll talk a bit about Shaping Ealing, which is a big programme of engagement we've been doing around some of our planning work, and Joanna, I'm sure, will give some other examples, perhaps as referenced in the report, particularly perhaps from the Race Equality Commission and our COVID work. We're definitely not here to say that the council's perfect at this, but we definitely, hopefully, the discussion can frame some of the practical action and pick up on some of the questions that were raised at the last meeting. If I focus particularly on Shaping Ealing, so the council has to produce something called the local plan. The local plan is a quite dry strategic planning document with really kind of significant long-term kind of implications for how space is used in the borough, for the opportunities to create jobs, for the ability to influence development and support the council's and the community's climate change ambitions. So a really important strategic document. We have to go through a quite structured programme of formal consultation, which is called the Reg 18 consultation, which will happen later this year. But what Shaping Ealing, which is the brand name that we've given to our work in advance of that, is much more about engagement. We've deliberately started at a more informal stage prior to formal consultation, and since November we've been running engagement under the Shaping Ealing banner. So the approach to Shaping Ealing is obviously to develop an evidence base for the future of our town centres and our communities, but also to reach out and involve local people to try new methods to get beyond those we normally hear from and have an inclusive and diverse approach to policy making, and also to learn as we go, and as I said, try and develop some of those more innovative approaches to engagement. We've designed the approach to engage widely, to really focus on what matters to people, so a really strong focus consistently on people's neighbourhood, the area they live in, to try and co-produce the design of that and the input with communities, and of course that will help us because there will be aspirations that the council and the community has that certainly will go beyond those which are kind of directly in the gift of the council. In terms of what the approach looked like, we started back in November with a quite broad and deliberately quite broad survey. Many of you will have seen this, I'm sure. We delivered the survey on something called the Give My View platform. This is a product that the council has licenses for. It's one of a number of consultation and engagement tools in the marketplace. The council's used others. We've used Commonplace, for example, on LTNs. But the idea of having a platform is that we make it user-friendly and easy for people to respond. So there's a broad survey asking for people's specific views on things which will need a planning policy on: development, jobs, community, and also some open questions. You know, what do people love about the area? What could be made better? The survey is very deliberately, as I said, structured around town centres. We think that's where people will choose to engage. And it's been very widely publicised via the council's comms channels, as people hopefully will have seen. In terms of the design of that engagement exercise, one of the features of Give My View is that it's particularly well suited to engagement with our digital marketing, engagement with social media. So reaching out, easily shareable in ways that in places where people are already having community conversations, be it on Twitter, be it in some of the area-based Facebook groups that we obviously many local people kind of participate in. So going where the conversation is. It also has got some very good translation functionality. So the council's corporate website can be translated into all of the main 9 community languages. And the same approach can be developed for the Give My View platform, the survey, and the associated marketing. So we're able to promote that and target that digital marketing in community languages and hopefully reach a segment of the community where we've struggled to reach in the past, where we haven't had that capability to quickly and easily produce the survey or the engagement activity in community languages. So that's been the kind of heart of the approach, if you like, in terms of having that sort of survey and looking to generate a really deep and widely responded to evidence base. And I know at the last meeting, members asked about the council's thinking around an engagement platform like Give My View. Were we going to make more use of it or a competitor product? And so I'm really pleased that this is probably the largest area where we've tested that tool. We've also been able to replicate that learning. Members may have seen that the same tool was used for the recent consultation on women's safety in the borough. In that example, tapping into some of the sort of geo mapping functionality to enable respondents, women, to tell us where they did and didn't feel safe in the borough. So that's, again, a kind of engaging, intuitive, easy to use functionality. And one of the benefits of us testing out the platforms, understanding what they can do and how we can deploy the engagement in ways that will make it user-friendly for people. We've also targeted our marketing campaign on the digital element of it to try and drive take up in the areas where it's sometimes harder for us to get responses. We do tend to have an overrepresentation of certain demographics in our consultations, and through Shaping Healing, we've been partly, not fully, able to mitigate that through the use of targeted digital marketing. Really important, though, to say that we 100% recognise that that approach alone, this isn't a numbers game. We've had almost 10,000 responses to the consultation or to the engagement, which is phenomenal and will give us a really rich evidence base to use for the local plan and also to develop for future consultations, given the wide-ranging nature. But it's really important that we also get deep feedback and deep reach and trust into communities. We saw in the Race Equality Commission report that was one of the challenges, that some communities didn't feel trusted or that it was worthwhile engaging with the council. So the programme has been supported by a whole range of more targeted and deeper engagement activity. So that's included some physical pop-up events facilitated by the council, both in Southall and at the Acton Christmas Market. There's some examples of the branding and the visuals used around that in the pack that was circulated. There've been events held, for example, with GOSAD in Southall, and there's a really telling bit of feedback in the report, which members may have seen, saying that respondents at that event, had questions and had doubts about the validity or the value of engaging with the council via a survey. And I think that kind of speaks to the need to complement that quantitative work with that deeper qualitative engagement. And that's through our Joanna's team, our engagement team, through our public health team, through our regen teams. We've been trying to reach out through our voluntary sector partners to voluntary sector groups, to schools, to residents associations, to stakeholder groups, to have those conversations and to supplement the quantitative evidence base with that qualitative feedback, which will both help us reach new audiences and also hopefully help bring to life and understand why people are telling us what they're telling, and in doing so build trust with the council. So that's been a really important programme of work. The survey is still live for respondents, so if anyone hasn't had a look or hasn't filled it in, I'd certainly encourage them to do so and to share the word with people, because we want to get as robust an example and evidence base for the local plan. But more importantly, I think this is a good practical example for us of some of the principles that we will want to model in our approach to engagement going forward. Starting earlier, trying to engage with people on their terms, using sort of new methods and in particular technology to help us reach out to communities, to demographics that we've historically found harder to reach to, and thinking about language, translation, targeting to support that goal, and really critically making a deeper reach, working across the council to tap into the networks that we do have and make better use of them to gather feedback and make sure the council has and its partners have a really robust and high quality evidence base on which to make decisions. So that's one example. I think I'm going to hand over at this point, Chair, to Joanna, who leads a lot of our area-based engagement work and perhaps can bring to life a couple of other examples of the work the councils do. Thank you.
Thanks, Kieran. So I included in the report on the Rating Commission, which Kieran has made reference to, and I think that the fundamental purpose of work on the mission was to hear from people. And I've said here that we put out a kind of very open survey question. We did have kind of 10,000 responses. We had around 200, significantly smaller. But what we did with that was kind of go out and talk to people, including at GOSAD and with some of the people on the call, had kind of more in-depth discussions with what people were doing in the survey. We also, members of the team, did phone calls with people who didn't want to fill the survey but had some to say. So as I say, we kind of tried to go to where people were rather than expect people to come to us for that. But given the whole year we were kind of running this, there were kind of restrictions on how people could get together. We probably would have done more of it in different circumstances. We definitely would have done, but we did what we could. And I think that we got a fairly rounded view, which fed into some to all of the demands as we framed it in the final report. And I think that the demands and findings do reflect what people told us. If I move on to on COVID, so my team worked with public health on response and how we get messages out and test whether the messages were being understood and being kind of acted on. And so we brought together some task groups in 4 areas where we brought together people who had influence and had networks where so the groups are very much focused on action rather than just briefing, and people coming in with ideas about what we could do and what we could frame some of the messaging differently. We're trying to build on that now in the Community Vaccine Champion Programme, where we've got a significant funding from central government to continue the work on kind of promoting vaccine take-up. Understanding, however, that people are fatigued with hearing about vaccines, so trying to broaden that out so it's more about a general conversation with people about health, in which we can also talk about getting vaccinated. And we're doing that through building up support that we provide to community and voluntary sector groups to provide to run those kind of conversations with people. I quickly talk about Do Some Good, which is the name for web pages that we use and facilitate voluntary action and engagement, which we reviewed and have worked with EHCVS on how we link that up with their activity, so that we're being clear that there's more formal volunteering opportunities kind of managed by them, and we attempt to encourage more of the kind of good citizen type volunteer, less formal roles. People have said that they like the fact that it's got non-council branding and we're facilitating it rather than controlling it, but interested in views. We also hosted the work on the Race Equality Commission on the basis that people needed to see that it was a genuinely independent body and how it was run. If to warn, so I won't go through all of this, but there's a bit of a history here of what's happened over the past few years, which was before, because I've only been with Ealing for about 1.5 years, so I haven't been when war was running. I've put in here to panel some of explanations around various things that have happened in the past couple of years, and then what these engaged team have been focused on most recently, last few months, which is where we had lots of outstanding commitments, projects that had been agreed but not yet delivered, and these have been progressed as far as possible. So there's a recent report that sets out the impact of the investment in various community-led projects through both the War Forums but also the Future Ealing Fund, which through crowdfunding has enabled lots of interesting projects to the grant. I think we talked a little bit, not at the last meeting of this panel, but the one before, about war forums, and I could just reflect it back here, some of the comments there. I think given that we've got relatively restricted resources to kind of supporting these and the administrative tasks of running so many of them, that resources spread too thinly. So I think the conclusion must be that they reach a wide enough or a diverse enough audience to warrant taking up so much that available resource. So interested to hear people's views on ways forward, and particularly on the idea that we might build on the work we've done in shaping Ealing and some of the regeneration engagement to do something more on a practice, and so kind of groups of wards, and then we can try different things in different areas and see what works, because the areas are different. So let's try different things in different places. I think that was it for my bits.
You're getting faded. I think your voice is getting a bit faded in the background. Joanna, have you finished your presentation? Yeah, you're breaking up. We cannot hear you.
I'm struggling to hear as well. Yeah. Okay. I think I might log off and log in again.
Yeah. Okay, we can do that.
I think, Chair, we have finished the introduction. So if you wanted to move to questions or comments while Joanna's logging back in, then that would probably be okay, I think.
I have decided to take the questions in the end of the presentations, because we have got 2 more presentations lined up tonight. So I think I will move on to the next presentation in the meantime, while Joanna comes back. So I will invite GoSAD to present their item, please.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. I'm just going to share the screen.
Yeah, please introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and then
Yes.
we go to your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Shama Kedirie, and I'm the programs lead for GoSAD. Today, hopefully, I'll be giving you some kind of perspective about, what we see as community engagement, in the kind of civil society sphere, but also, to share maybe some information about some of the stuff around our engagement, because we, as a charity, we play a kind of bridging role between residents and the council and other stakeholders. But mostly we work with some of the most marginalized communities. So I will kind of start. Okay, so GoSAD was set up in 2003 by 3 young people. Actually, these 3 young people are from kind of BME communities. And the reason they set up the organization is because it was an informal setup, because there's no facilities for young people in the southern area at the time that they could engage with. And then what happened is the organization in 2014, they changed to supporting adults. And the reason is that because we work with young people for many years, and it was imperative that parents of these young people also needed support. The organization supports between 700 to 1,000 residents per year. And during COVID, we supported about 1,800 residents. And this is actually in collaboration with other organizations, because it was a very testing time when the pandemic happened. And also we took a lot of, we took part in the Healing Together program from the beginning. So 99.9% of our beneficiaries are from minoritized communities. And we work with, communities such as the Nepalese community, the Punjabi-speaking community, the Somali community, the Arab-speaking communities, people from Sri Lanka. We've also worked with, some Eastern Europeans in the past. So as an organization, we cannot turn anybody away, anybody that comes to seek our services. And we use something called a person-centered approach and an asset-based approach, where we see every person that comes to us as somebody who can contribute to communities. So we don't see people as victims. We see people as somebody maybe might not be speaking English, but it doesn't mean they're unable to do things. So that's our approach. And also we recognize that people come from different cultures. So we try to accommodate that. And we've been doing co-designing or co-production for a very long time. And that's our approach. So the vision of GoSAD is to see a vibrant and equal society where everyone is valued for their potential and where their human rights are observed and protected. GoSAD's mission is to engage every section of the community in creating person-centered, workable solutions to meet ever-changing societal needs and wants. Just quickly, some of the projects we're doing at the moment. We normally have volunteer-led projects and some unfunded projects. And in 2016, because of the austerity measures, we found ourselves every time we referred somebody somewhere, either that organization was closing down or they didn't have capacity. So we decided to provide a kind of one-stop shop for our users. So we decided to develop projects where if funding ends, we have volunteers who can step in and continue the project. So our current project at the moment, we're an accredited information and advice center. So we have something called the AQS. We've got a lot of projects for young people. We've got actually a program now on employment and self-employment. We're working very closely with the Leading Council. We have an Anti-Radicalization Project, and this is, I think, the 3rd year. We're going into the 4th year. We have a new project on special education and schools and transition program. And the reason we have this project is because we identified a lot of BME communities didn't understand the SCN kind of environment, and also some kids were being either, they didn't have any diagnosis, or the health and care plans were not done properly. The health and care, education, health and care plans, and also because we've been working with neat young people for many, many years, helping them into employment. Most of them were telling us that, some of them were identified as having SCN, but they didn't have any support. Also, we do stuff around transition, where, kids moving from year 6 to year 7, and also from, GCSEs, once they finish and they go to A levels or BTech or such courses. Also, we've been delivering a lot of COVID-19 interventions. And at the moment, also, we're actually working with Ealing Public Health. We have a new program, as Anna, I think, mentioned. So we are actually focusing on building immunity of the communities, because people are tired about vaccination and being told, you need to vaccinate, when actually we can help people build that immunity. So we're starting a cooking, health cooking classes, where we look at every community and looking at, their indigenous foods, and we turn it into healthier versions of the indigenous foods. And hopefully we'll have a recipe book very soon of all the different communities. We have a BMER mental health project at the moment, but this is actually in Hanzo, unfortunately, but we're hoping to do this in Ealing. We've done work around FGM, but actually focusing on men and not women. And also involved in a lot of partnerships with Ealing organizations and some national organizations. So we've actually shared our annual report, for 2020, 2021. It will give you an idea of the kind of work we do. And as I said, we, GOSAD and other charitable organizations, we bridge the gap between, residents and different stakeholders. And I think when I was asked to look at, for example, community engagement with the council, I think today, for me, it's about giving a perspective of what we see on the ground on a day-to-day basis, and where, for example, is not some kind of antagonistic work between, the sector and the council. And as Kieran Reid said, it is about nobody's perfect. So unfortunately, sometimes, when we have to, to look at engagement, sometimes we end up maybe raising a lot of complaints about services, where maybe there's an issue around communication. Just on Monday, we have a client who, the family were put on something called Child in Need, and they didn't actually know they were part of, our Child in Need program, and we had to explain to them. And instead of them complaining, we found a solution with the social workers. So I think for us we see it as a two-way process. Kind of the aspirations, concerns, needs, and values of citizens and communities are incorporated at all levels, in all sectors, in policy development, planning, decision-making, service delivery, and assessment. And governments and other businesses and local authorities, civil society organizations, involving citizens, clients, communities, and other stakeholders in the process. So it's about co-designing. And also the establishment of ongoing partnership between services and communities seen as the means by which this process can be achieved and sustained. Also, communication with residents as part of community engagement must be clear and outcome driven. User experiences, accessing services, scrutiny and disclosure, measuring impact of different communication methods and channels. So just as an example, when the Race Equality Commission was happening, we kept raising issues. And one of the issues we raised was, we wanted the commission to look at the work of the council internally in terms of, for example, how many complaints have been made against the council on different areas. What has the council done to kind of resolve those issues? So although we know the commission has done their work, but we still think this wasn't done, the way we thought it would be done. But I think it's a step on the right direction. So as I said, we actually got so many examples, so for example, around the COVID-19 itself, we produced a report. So what I did, I involved 5 other BME-led organizations, and we sampled about 347 residents, mostly BME, mostly affected by COVID. And we identified a lot of issues with the communities. So for the purpose of this presentation, we've been also asking our users about, how effective the council communication channels are. So we sampled about 79 of our users, and 76% of participants reported inability to access, respond to, or engage with all communication channels. I remember, I think about 4 or 5 months ago, because we received the newsletter from the council, and on one particular newsletter, there were 3 different kind of online surveys, and unfortunately, majority of our users. So you can imagine if we have 1,000 users, roughly about 600-700 will be having problems in terms of language, and they're kind of digitally excluded. So 76% of the same participants depend on support from GOSED, family or friends to access and make use of information shared by the council. We've had situations where, for example, users will come to us with advertisement. For example, it could be a leaflet, because they don't know actually what the leaflet says. They think maybe it's something from the council and it's quite important. They'll bring it to us. And also the issue around mental health. We've had clients who, when it comes to engaging with the council, they are so anxious and so perturbed that, they come to us for help, to make a call or to support them. I think most poignant is that 7 participants reported issues of trust, which, kind of lack of trust with all the council communication channels. 100% of the participants have never heard of ward forums. So this is something we mentioned in the report I did, where we did also a little bit of mystery shopping. We attended one, but we won't say which ward, where there was only 2 people at that ward forum, and there was no representation of the residents. So system failures between March 2020 to March 2022, our project advisors have reported over 50 malfunctioning or breakdown of the locator, my account, and DHP portals. So this is again another issue that we don't see being addressed, where people maybe something freezes, or there's an issue around accessing some of these channels. So there are kind of numerous examples we can give, and I think one of my suggestions will be, to engage with organizations like GOSED and others to actually look at how communication and engagement can actually permeate through the whole of the council. So for example, our understanding as an organization is that if there's a strategy on engagement or communication, it should actually, so each department should have also its own type of, a strategy around the type of communication and engagement that they need to have with clients, with residents. And I think we see a lot of disjointed, like just a simple example is, so you have somebody who is under social services, and maybe they are homeless, a social worker cannot go to the housing department and say, look, what's happening with the, with this client's application. So we've had actually social workers telling us, they can't, do that. So we have to do through GOSED. Another example is, you're calling somebody through housing benefit and you have a question around council tax. You spend about an hour waiting to speak to somebody. And then when you start talking about council tax, the advisor will say, oh, I need to connect you, or you need to call another number. So there's so engagement for us is, to that kind of micro level. And I think we have a lot of examples. I said, we are happy to share all the different things we've identified. Also, there's the issue about accountability. Our evidence and experience suggests that far too many residents are digitally excluded, and other are doubly affected by language. Now, we know, for example, since the pandemic, there's been a suggestion that more people are now becoming digitally included. But what this does, actually, it hides the real facts. So the real fact is that people are pushed onto universal credit without any support. So when, for example, the job center closed in Southall, and you had the job center staff at Dominion Center, they kept directing clients to us. So we helped, and we've done this. We've done a report on this. Callum is here, so Callum can attest to this. So people, it's a kind of stick and carrot. For you to claim welfare, you have to be universal credit. For you to engage with the council, we have a lot of, we saw a lot of women and even men who are in the gig economy. And what the problem with that is that they don't know how many hours they need to work sometimes. They depend on the agencies, but they're supposed to inform the council on a monthly basis how the income fluctuates. So we've had people being made homeless because they didn't know how to do this online. And you've got a 4-week period, window to actually establish a change of your circumstances. So to say that more people are becoming digitally included, I think is a fallacy to us, and it hides a lot of things. And again, for us, mental health is a big issue. So the council communication strategy does not link or question its own services to residents. So we don't see anything about collecting feedback or finding what's happening. We've been in Ealing from 2003, and so far we haven't seen anything like that. I think it's one thing to promote and advertise what the council does, but there's another whole issue to ascertain. Firstly, if those services are accessible or even exist, and secondly, to check if such services are potential to infringe on residents' rights. So we've had situations where people have been informed that service or something exists, and then we find actually to access those kind of services, either you don't find the right people, or you don't actually get any support. The council is not open and transparent on how effective its communication strategy is fair, especially amongst its BME communities. Now, if you look at the area-based kind of consultations at the moment, now, unfortunately, we had consultations with some of the community managers like Evelyn, and we made it very clear that we need to have a paper version. We need to find other ways, but then it's digital. So now again, we know we're going to miss a lot of data. Okay, the council. Yeah, the council is not fully involving residents with lived experiences when developing strategies such as the COM strategy. So we think residents should be involved. The issue of inequalities and how to bring such gaps remain unresolved, and our past experiences have brought into question the utilization of the council's community engagement team and department. And I'll give an example about this. So when we have community engagement managers, officers come to GOSED and other organizations, so we expect to see that whatever they've gathered is actually transformative. And then if we see something or other organizations see that nothing has been done, then the problem is that those engagement teams or managers, when they come back to organizations like GOSED, we also lose trust and we don't know what to share. There's a lot of good examples. So one of the examples is, when the area-based kind of consultation before it was kind of put in place, we kind of pleased to see some of the questions we thought residents should be asked. we were able to see it's actually in this survey. And also I'd like to talk about Evelyn and Tan from your teams. I think they do amazing work and they understand the community so much. But for us, we don't know how their kind of contributions are absorbed and taken into, organizations. And there's so many examples with a lot of, staff members from the council who go beyond and above. We've got so many examples of, people have gone beyond and above their duties to support the clients we support. Where confusion has arisen from information shared by the council, for example, the website, we've encountered numerous staff members that have assisted in resolving issues. So we had a recent issue, and there's a lady called Fiona Dealey who was really, amazing. She actually got back to us because our roof was taken off by Storm Eunice. And also I'd like to mention Kieran Reid for his help and his team. Our roof has been fixed now, and we're able to see clients. So there's a lot of good stuff. So some of the recommendations is, I think there's no time like now for the council to ensure that every resident, is kind of included in what it does. And this could be through, I know sometimes the council will go through the CVS or Healing Community Network, which is fine. But actually, there's a lot of organizations that the council can work directly with, who actually, even sometimes, they feed back to this kind of networks. So we know the census for 2021 will show there'll be more than 50% of the residents will be BME. But also for me, it's about using this kind of terminologies, BME communities. So although it could be like a majority, but we know each community is different. And I mentioned this in the report that we did, that we have to be very careful. For example, with the Syrian communities who are, given support by the council, but when this support ended, we ended up picking up the pieces. There's issues around each community and how they, experience accessing services, how they experience, raising their kids or families in the borough. So again, I'll say the council has got a very, great asset in the community engagement team that it has, and I think, we would like to see that their work is taken up. We know it does, but sometimes maybe we don't see this. And Kieran mentioned about co-production, which I think is very important. And this is, I think sometimes, I think if the council does something like this, it would be very, very useful. And also, I'll maybe say that the other very important thing is the council, and I mentioned this with Evelyn and Tan, is that if, for example, we're looking at these surveys, area-based surveys, why not put some money, train local people or young people maybe who are over 18, train them to be community researchers, and actually, or people with lived experience, and let them lead on this and support. Because what we've seen is, we have a few examples where there's one particular, I think, project where, the agreement was that this would be done internally, but then we found the council actually ended up employing, a big research agency, which missed out on one of the biggest communities in Ealing, were not actually included in the translations. We had to raise the matter, and then the council kind of rectify that. So I think, this is the right time for us to work together. And also my last suggestion is that council officers, and especially the councillors, is to come to organizations like GOSAD and other organizations to actually see the work that's being done, to engage with the constituents, because we don't see this. And I think civic engagement is really very poor. And unfortunately, one of the things is that, when we have councillors, or elected members of parliament, they have to seek this kind of votes from residents, but we don't see any reciprocity, to reciprocate, that kind of, and I think by knowing what people are going through, just as another example, GOSAD, where GOSAD is based, was put forward for gentrification. So we had to work really hard and fight to secure the building. Now there's a building next to us which was operated by Rice, because we work in porta cabins. And that building was much better in terms of facilities than our building, where there's about 4-5 BME-led charities there. So we were surprised to see that building actually being demolished. And the place where it's been demolished, unfortunately, it's been now hired out to a mechanic who sells cars. So these kind of things, you know, it just shows breakdown of engagement, breakdown of communication. I think you see people getting marginalized, and it's the third sector that picks up the pieces. If you look at the social return on investment in terms of the work GOSET does and other organizations, we'll find that most of the time we're doing actually the work of the council. You know, yeah. Thank you. I think that's me finished.
Okay, that's really great. Thank you very much, Shamek, for sharing your experience and the problems that you have faced and making recommendation, which I'm sure the officers and the panel members will take into consideration. And I'm sure there will be plenty of questions lined up already. As I have mentioned in the beginning of this meeting, that we will be asking all the questions at the end of the presentation. So now I will invite our next guest to present her item, and that is from the Ealing Residents Association. So Kay, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you very much for allowing me to address the panel this evening. First, I'd just like to give you a bit of context. A number of community groups came together last autumn as Ealing Residents Association, or ERA, with the aim of conducting a survey of Ealing's residents and their perceptions of living in the borough. The survey included questions on resident engagement with the council. Fieldwork took place online, with respondents being recruited from ERA members' mailing lists, via community Facebook pages across the borough, or via groups working with harder to reach residents. The survey launched on the 15th of November and remained open until the end of last year. 1,645 respondents started the survey, but as often with online questionnaires, some people dropped out along the way. Just under 1,300 residents completed the whole survey, and we received responses from each of Ealing's 23 wards. Similar to the council Shaping Ealing survey, respondents to ours were self-selecting, with the result that there are biases in the sample. While our aim was to cover the population of Ealing aged 18 plus as a whole, residents of Ealing and Hanwell, older residents and owner-occupiers were overrepresented in our sample, while residents of the other 5 towns, and notably Southall, younger residents and those in social or private rented accommodation were underrepresented. That's not to say that there weren't people in there, but they weren't in proportion to their importance in the borough. Of relevance to this meeting is the fact that the survey looked at the council's engagement with the community, as well as contacts initiated by residents with the council and councillors. Respondents were asked first how they felt about engagement by Ealing Council with residents. Virtually all had a view on this question, and 86% of them were unhappy. In fact, 60% of respondents were not happy at all. This result was similar regardless of subgroup. Answers to the open-ended questions in the survey shed some light on this finding. Respondents felt that the council did not engage with residents about its policies, notably with regard to development. This was different in Acton on this occasion, where respondents had noted a greater willingness to engage since the change in leadership, but elsewhere there were doubts that this had resulted in real change. Many ward councillors came in for criticism as being remote, complacent, and not very helpful, This wasn't helped by there being fewer communication channels for residents, for example, fewer ward forums and lack of surgeries. The council's consultations were viewed with cynicism, some respondents believing that outcomes were a foregone conclusion, with residents' contributions ignored and the council pursuing its own agenda. There was also criticism of the channels used by the council to communicate with residents, notably around Ealing and LBE's website. With regard to contacts initiated by residents, 2/3 of our respondents had contacted the council in the previous 12-month period. The main reasons for their most recent contact being either to report a problem, to comment on a planning application, or to find out about, arrange or pay for a service. Among those who'd contacted the council, more were dissatisfied than satisfied with their most recent contact. Spontaneous comments highlighted problems with the available contact methods. The council's own residents survey of 2018 found the telephone to be by far the most popular contact method, yet problems with contacting the council by telephone were very common among our respondents. LBE's website was also criticised as being user unfriendly, difficult to navigate, and failing to deal adequately with accessibility issues. Regardless of contact method, there are also complaints of poor service once respondents managed to reach the right department. Turning to ward councillors, about 2/3 of respondents were aware of at least one of their 3 ward councillors, although only 1 in 3 knew all of them, perhaps reflecting the lack of outreach mentioned previously. Only 1/3 of respondents had contacted any of their ward councillors in the preceding 12 months, mostly via email, and most had received a response. In contrast to their experience with council staff, respondents were more likely to be satisfied than dissatisfied with the contact with their ward councillor. Where there were spontaneous comments, they related to the failure to respond or responses that didn't solve the problem in hand. That sums up our findings on resident engagement. We're looking forward to comparing the findings of our survey with those of Shaping Ealing. In the meantime, the findings of this survey have wider implications for this panel, as the perceived quality of engagement also shapes broader perceptions of the council. The experiences of our sample have led many to conclude that the council doesn't listen to its residents and that it doesn't respect their needs. Our findings contain hard truths, but they also point to some solutions. The question is, what will this panel do about it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kay, for your presentation. And now I'll go back to Joanna Sumner to complete her presentation where we left off.
So I think I had completed it, but you might have missed the end. But I think it's just as set out in the report. So if there's anything perhaps you want me to come back to in through questions, I can do. Yeah.
All right, so we're done with our presentation for this meeting. So now I will invite the panel members to ask questions from the officers or from Gosad or Kay Garmison. Please raise your hands or put your name in the chat window. Are there any questions? Okay, so the first hand I can see is from Matthew Colum. Please ask your question.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Yeah, I've got, I guess, 3 questions, 2 regarding Shaping Ealing, and the other one's not really a question, it's more of a comment. The first question regarding Shaping Ealing. So I didn't see any mention in there about the council's plan to relocate its front-facing in-person services to local community access hubs. It's a big issue for Ealing Advice Service residents. Since Percival House closed its sort of front-facing services, you know, the drop-ins for inquiries from residents at the start of the lockdown, there hasn't really been a place where people can go to in person to raise issues. I have, I'm aware that there's a pilot currently taking place, or will be taking place over the next few months, to relocate these front-facing services into community access hubs, or the local libraries, I think it will be, which I think is an incredibly positive move. I think if it's resourced well and done well, that could be fantastic, and it could increase engagement with residents, particularly the most vulnerable, who are unable to use a telephone, or they are digitally excluded. Libraries are in people's neighbourhoods. They can provide qualitative information as well as the quantitative information about outputs and the numbers of people coming in about particular issues. It also encourages literacy, because it's a library, and they tend to come in and engage when they have an issue. So, when they have a problem, not a preventative thing. It's more like, I've got a problem with my council tax bill or something like that. And that means that it's easy to, it makes it a good source of information about where there are gaps and issues with systems and services that are in place. And it could also, those libraries can also be used as a hub for outreach by ward councillors. As the Residents Association mentioned, that's something that really needs to improve. And so I was wondering, is there a possibility, is there any plans for that to be included in the Shaping Ealing plan? It seems like a bit of a missed opportunity, really. The second question I had about Shaping Ealing was regarding one of the principles, which is engaging on what matters to people. And my question there is, which people? So are we going to be looking at weighing up responses? Are we looking at a utilitarian approach where it's the greatest good for the greatest number? Or are we looking at, giving certain weight to more vulnerable communities, because they may well be experiencing issues that the wider community are not? And there's a risk that the most articulate residents with the loudest voices may have their views prioritised, whereas people who are harder to reach would be drowned out. Examples of this could be when it comes to increasing social housing in the borough. You've got people who desperately need more social housing. There was a very large number of people on the waiting list. That versus NIMBYism and people who are not happy with developments taking place near where they live. And so there's a bit of a balancing act there. And how are the council going to deal with that? And I guess with GOSAD's presentation, didn't really have any questions. It was really just that GOSAD's experiences sort of reflect what we see at the Ealing Advice Service as well. Digital exclusion, language barriers. Also, we see a lot of clients who have learning disabilities who are unable to use digital platforms for other reasons. And also the thing that Shamaka highlighted about silos within the council. Sometimes council departments don't talk to one another particularly well, and we also experience that as well with between mental health services in the council. There seems to be a bit of disconnect there sometimes. So yeah, I think that's it. So I'll put it to the presenters.
Thank you for your questions, and I think Kiran, you want to come back on these?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matthew, for the question. I'll perhaps kick off, and if any officer colleagues want to add to what I've said, please do. On the first question about community hubs, you're absolutely right, Matthew. We have got that pilot going on, and it was great to hear how positive you are. I think wanting to work closely with communities, also with our community partners, so the voluntary sector, that's a real kind of opportunity. I think the point you make about bringing the council closer to communities is really valid, and also picking up Sharmake's presentation, that kind of assisted access to our services. So we've done some work in recent times with our Digital Champions Network, trying to train staff to help people and community partners to help access our kind of online services and those of other public services. The more that's embedded locally, the better. So in terms of will that be in Shaping Ealing, probably, maybe, although we're doing the work a bit more immediately, and the primary output of Shaping Ealing will be to inform that work on our kind of planning policy. So that level of detail about the council as a service providers service delivery model might not feature in the local plan, but I think I can respond very positively to the broader thrust of the comment you're making about, is this an agenda that we're seeing, we're exploring, and we're wanting to test out. And I know there's a number of conversations with voluntary sector partners about how that might work. On your second question, hopefully the kind of introduction gave you sort of some reassurance and confidence that the approach to the sort of shaping healing engagement phase has been designed to both ensure we get a broader range of responses to the survey than perhaps we have traditionally, accepting that, you know, the comments that Shamake and others have made about there'll be some residents who never choose that to be the way they engage with us, and also to sort of supplement that with the qualitative work, those local conversations with groups, with schools, with residents, kind of associations, to make sure we've got that feedback. I don't think there's one simple answer to your question. It's certainly not, you know, the responses will not simply be a purely sort of quantitative, because the council will have to weigh a whole host of, you know, statutory responsibilities on us, competing agendas. I think it's inevitable, isn't it, that there are differing priorities. So what I can say to you is that the policy intention to listen, to understand the full breadth of views in our community sort of is underpinning both the shaping healing approach and the wider shift we are trying to make and embed in our sort of culture and processes around engagement. So again, I hope that provides some sort of reassurance to you, and probably addresses hopefully some of the points that the other presenters also made in terms of kind of constructive feedback for the council about how we can do better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now I will move on to the next question from Councillor Gallant.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Shamake. Thank you for Kieran and Joanna, and thank you, Kay, for your reports. And that was a lot of sobering thoughts there. But thanks for speaking so directly, because I don't think there's any way we can actually move on unless you do that. And I've just got three things I'd like to touch on, which have all been discussed at length. And I don't really know how to frame the question here. Just on this business of language and digital exclusion, two things. Perhaps we need to advance technologically so that we actually are able to include more people digitally. Perhaps the council is actually behind on that. The whole point of technology, the whole point of digital technology is to facilitate communication. It's not to make it more complicated for people. And I think probably we have to think of technology as a kind of language itself. So in the same way as people feel excluded in terms of spoken language, we need to think of technology as a language in its own right. So that's what I would say there. And I'd love to hear more about that. But I think what we need to do is move on and develop better technology in the council. And the other thing is, I'm sorry to hear that of course, it's depressing for a councillor to hear that people think that councillors are aloof and don't want to communicate with residents, because I suspect that there isn't a single councillor here, elected councillor here, who got elected because they didn't want to communicate with residents. They do want to communicate with residents. Ward forums should provide a good platform for that. A ward forum was there so that councillors would answer. There would be a meeting at a certain time, a certain place, and the ward forum would disperse money on a very, very locally, so it could be actually applied very, very locally where local people wanted it applied. But I don't think it did the job for the simple reason I don't think enough people turned up to a ward forum that not enough people attended. Is it a question of advertising the ward forum better, or is it a question of doing more ward forums, or perhaps doing ward forums online on a more regular basis? Or are there other ways that councillors can put themselves across, that people want to see them, put themselves across in public, so that their faces are better known? Because I think you can't replace a face. I mean, a councillor is the face. A councillor is the face, the thing that links you know, the council, the state, and the local state, if you like, we're the public. You know, we are those people, and we've got to be there. You know, we just have to really make a big effort there. The third thing is the voluntary sector, and we just had a meeting yesterday about the voluntary sector and the new scheme that it's come up with, and there's a new company there, I think there's a lot of great work that's going to happen. I don't consider my political work or my council work or my engagement with residents any different to my voluntary work. I mean, I run acting charities. We help local families in need, I consider that as part of my council work. I think that if we encourage more people into the voluntary sector, it's not just a question of encouraging people to do good work, but it's also a question of if they get involved with it, they will actually meet more councillors and they'll meet more officers and they'll see what's going on and they have a better they have a better experience of that whole structure of the council. So there's a lot of work to do to get more participation. And being a conservative, this, of course, you know, the great thing about more people in the voluntary sector is that we'll save money because there's lots of ways that work in the voluntary sector can actually save and actually avoid the cost of people who'd be employed to do those jobs. So it's all good. We need more participation, and I think that would help the whole process. So those are a few thoughts, not really questions, but a few thoughts, and I'd love to hear your views. You develop that a little bit.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your valuable input, Councillor Gallant. I'm sure there would be plenty of more panel members who would be giving their input as well. So if you have any question, any feedback, comment, please raise your hand. So now I will invite Councillor Driscoll to ask or give his input.
Yeah, I mean, this has been pretty wide-ranging, and thank you for all the participants who've given their thoughts. Interesting, the idea of like local hubs of services was picked up. It'd be useful to know what we've done with previous local delivery of services, because I think Southall had quite a big investment, but what have we learned from that, because that was opened up and then withdrawn because it wasn't used as much. So what did we learn from that deployment of local services that we can put into any future work? Because I think it's really important that the services that if they're going to be deployed locally in terms of contact with the council, that they're meaningful, and it's not going locally to then ring up the phone to call Percival House. So it'd be interesting to know what is going to be delivered, and it might not be at that point where we can say that now, but I think some of the learnings from the Southall Town Hall, which I think was a local delivery point, would be good to hear about. Yeah, ward forums, I think they're often seen as the whole totem pole of how we contact with councillors, but I think the report mentioned and it's quoted Northfields, I think it's a quote from me about how we delivered thousands of leaflets to get people to come and ended up with 70, 80, maybe 90 and a really good turnout, and that seems a good turnout out of a population of 11,000. And ironically, it was to discuss local traffic issues well before LTNs were on the agenda. So we were ahead of the curve then. So I think that whole idea, I think a lot of these thoughts and themes from this evening are nothing new in terms of engagement. And I think Kay's comments about the skewing of engagement away from the young, away from often private rented sector. And I think of Northfields with about a third of the housing stock in the private rented sector. You know, it's a significant underrepresentation of vast swathes of the residents and population. So, but these challenges are nothing new. And getting young people to engage, and I can think of myself when I was in my 20s, I was enjoying London way too much to do lots of that's social stuff in life with my neighbours. I was just out in the West End. So all these challenges are persistent, and I think it's upon us to think about where we don't have a cure-all. I think Ghost had come in and Shamik's comments about the disparity with BAME communities and getting digital engagement. I mean, I wonder, the council has been using digital champions. I know we've got some of the peoples with those roles in the Northfield ward, where they're there as fellow residents to help people through accessing digital services, getting used to using computers, getting used to doing things online. And I know the council's, I think, been training digital champions to be there locally. And I don't know if that's been used in the Southall area much, but it could be a really good challenge to set ourselves locally to deliver that. And I wonder if that could be of help. Joanna mentioned about feedback about do something good. My opinion about do something good is actually it's great. Apart from you'd never know it was anything to do with Ealing Council. But if you scratch the surface, everything's to do with Ealing Council on that site pretty much. If you want, all the gatekeepers are Ealing Council officers, all the funding is Ealing Council pretty much, but you'd struggle to find out. And why are we embarrassed? So people are don't trust Ealing, don't trust councils, don't see the value, whatever, and yet we do something really great. They do something good, website brings a lot of things together, and yet actually we're not really proud about what we're doing. We're not actually making a tangible connection. I looked at the Play Streets pages because we have the most Play Streets in the borough in Northfields, and you have to read halfway down the page to know it's Ealing Council's involved in Play Streets. Managed by officers, authorised by the council and so on, but why? I don't know. And I think it's quite shocking really, because we're just embarrassed to say that we actually deliver this. And I think it's just not recognising all the back office work of this and all the funding and support is Ealing Council. Do something good is not an entity in its own right. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not a freestanding entity. If the Ealing Council wasn't supporting it, it wouldn't be there. And that needs to be recognised. I'd like to mine a bit further into Kay's questionnaire and the responses from that, especially with some of the issues and the problems there. So that would be really interesting to see that. And I think I'll sort of end on the comments on interesting to see people's perceptions of how they're involved with the council and their comments are taken. But how do we inform people about the role of comments and the role of consultations? I use planning as an example because we've got to abide by national planning rules, regional, local planning rules. So it's not a referendum, and it's a consultation. It's get feedback and thoughts and comments for a planning decision. It's not about thousands and thousands of comments being a vote on a planning decision. But do we? And there are explanations on the planning website, but do we actually engage with people and explain that in other aspects of our work? Because I think often we're setting up people, give us your thoughts and comments, and we can do all of them. And sometimes thoughts and comments from individuals are contradictory because people have different opinions, but also we've got some statutory obligations which we're probably not very good at explaining to people, that there are some things which curtail our activities. So I wonder, how do we educate and inform people about the scope and breadth of the council's discretion and where that consultation is going to go ahead? So there's quite a raft of comments there, and I'll leave it at that point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Driscoll. You made really, really good points. And it has been discussed before that do something good should have a council's branding. I mean, why are we not doing that? So if there is any response from the officers, then please come forward. Otherwise, I will move on to the next question.
Should I just say, Chair, that I mean, I take that on board, and perhaps I can discuss with the communications team about how we make the council responsibility for do something good much clearer. So I'll take that away as an action to follow up.
Yeah, thank you. And I think educating and informing the residents as part of the consultation of, like Councillor Driscoll just mentioned about planning procedure, it will be really helpful for the residents to understand what they can object and what they can't, and what councils is supposed to do as part of their obligation. So lots of improvements, to be honest. So let's move on to the next question from Councillor Steve.
Oh, sorry,
Okay,
Councillor.
yeah,
I was just on a number of member comments and questions about the digital inclusion and the language. I wondered if it was helpful to respond.
it would be helpful, yes.
So this is something I think where, so prior to COVID, the council really didn't translate, very, very little information, really only where there was a statutory responsibility to do it in some of our statutory services. I think during COVID, we realised that approach wasn't going to enable us to reach all of the communities we needed to talk to, and colleagues like Sharma Kay are working with. So, that was a big change for the council in terms of thinking about translating materials. We're probably in a slightly different phase now. So, as a result of that learning, if anyone's someone might.
Can you guys mute your mics, please?
Okay. Yeah. So if anyone's been on the Ealing Council, ealing.gov website recently, they'll see that you can now auto translate that functionality into the main 9 community languages that are used in the borough. Now, I appreciate some people still face digital exclusion, but we would really hope that's been a really useful step forward on COVID, when we've been reaching out to residents around Brexit and the settled status scheme, trying to provide that information in their own languages. The same functionality is now built on the relaunched around ealing.com website, which is where we put a lot more of our news, our more engaging content, drive people to from social media. So that's a big bit of work that Keith Lewis, who's on the call, has taken forward. And while it doesn't solve all of the issues, we do think that that's made a step forward in our digital channels and making them more inclusive. There are other areas we need to improve on, particularly in wider accessibility. There are too many legacy PDFs still on the website, which is not great for people with visual impairments, and we're working through that. On the point on language, I also mentioned that the Give My View surveys can all be auto-translated, so that I think has helped raise awareness. And finally, on digital inclusion, that is a really important part of the strategy. I'm really pleased to hear a number of members mention the Digital Champion Scheme. That's something we partnered with the voluntary sector and an organisation called Citizens Online around to train up staff, voluntary sector volunteers and so on to provide advice. The scheme has been really well received. There are some lovely case studies both on around Ealing and on Citizens Online website. So there's lots more to do, and I recognise the feedback from Sharma Kay's survey was quite recent, so clearly some users still experiencing those challenges. I don't want to suggest it's all perfect, but I did want to give a sense to members that I think language is probably an area where there has been a big, and I would expect, sustained change in the way the council provides its information. Clearly, when we're doing printed material, whilst we've made selective use of translation, particularly to signposts, it's just unaffordable to translate and print everything in all of those languages. So that obviously, digital, as Councillor Driscoll said, and Councillor Gallant said, does give us more flexibility. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Steed, please ask your question or make your contribution.
Hi, good evening. I've got 2 questions, if I may. Firstly, to Sharma Kay. Sharma Kay, you mentioned that you also work with Hounslow Council, and I just wondered briefly, I mean, how you would compare working with Hounslow as compared to working with Ealing. I mean, your report is quite critical of Ealing. I just wonder whether a similar report you might do for Hounslow will be equally critical, and if one council is performing better or worse than the other, what may be the differences there. Secondly, to Kieran Reid, the Shaping Ealing section of your report, which is very interesting. Both you and Joanna refer to the fact that you've managed to communicate or get responses from 10,000 people, which does sound pretty good. I suspect it compares well with past exercises similar to this. I just wonder though, you place great emphasis on the need to be more inclusive and more diverse. And I wonder if here we are, what, 4 months after that process started, whether you've actually got any statistics at this stage to prove that you have been more inclusive and you have been more diverse.
Okay, thanks. Shamaki, you want to respond to Councillor Steed's question and share your experience working with Hounslow Council and how you compare it with Ealing Council?
Thanks, Councillor Andrew. And I've got comments about the other comments and questions, but I think I'll answer his question. Actually, there's a lot of, I even mentioned this on the report on the impact of COVID-19 on Ealing's BME communities. So for example, if you look at the way Hounslow Council disburses its funds to the third sector, civil society organizations, it's completely different. In terms of community engagement, very good practices over there. Just 2 days ago, we had one of the safer neighborhood staff member come to visit Gossett, because our office in Southall, we actually bordering Hounslow and Hillingdon, so we also get people from Hillingdon. The other thing also is, if you look at when Ealing Together was put together and the way Hounslow put together their kind of crisis COVID system, it was slightly different. And we're actually the chief executive and the top individuals there. They were involved in almost weekly kind of consultations. And also housing, for example, when we deal with housing in Hounslow, is very straightforward. We don't wait too long on the phone. The staff members there, they can look at everything in one place, so you don't have to speak to someone else at council tax. So there's a lot of examples, and we can share this. And also I can use a lot of other examples in, for example, in Barnet, every call that residents make to the different council departments, after the call, there's a survey of about 3 questions. So the idea about that is that, things are recorded, because sometimes we have issues where, we've raised a complaint for a client to Ealing, and then it becomes hearsay. So we know that some of the calls are not recorded, so we cannot get the transcripts. In Bradford, for example, so in terms of Hounslow, we and of course everything is not perfect there, but we find dealing with the council much better than, and it's something that maybe I can share at another time. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay, that's great to know. I'm sure Ealing Council can get positives from other councils like Barnet and Hounslow. Thank you very much. And Kiran, you want to come back to the second question?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Steed. So we have, as you'd expect, been sort of tracking that, and we've also been following up and using the area-based engagement and the part of the digital marketing budget to target and improve take-up. I think it's fair to say what that's meant we've done is narrow the gap and improve the representativity of the survey overall, and obviously bearing in mind the survey is still open and those efforts are still ongoing. We've got quite a good spread of respondents across the age profile of the council, although I'd say we've still got some work to do with the youngest demographics, who it is a hard subject to engage on. We probably still have a slight over-representation of respondents in the Ealing town centre area relative to others. So that's the largest of the town centres, but on a percentage basis, still over-represented. And that will speak to the fact also that speaking across the population, we'll have a relatively slight over or representation from white respondents and an under on a equivalized basis representation from Black and minority ethnic communities. That said, the size of the response, the 10,000 or so in total, and the qualitative data means I think we still will have, large numbers of responses from any of those demographics to be able to talk about what people from those communities or those demographics have told us. So that there is a benefit there, obviously, in the total scale. I think from working with Give My View, that this is the largest response to a local plan consultation they've seen from any of the sites they've supported. I stand to be corrected, but that's my understanding at this point in time. So from that sense, we're pleased, but there is obviously more to do to continue to sort of narrow those gaps. I hope that addresses your question.
Okay, thank you very much for responding to the question, Kieran. I can see another hand from Councillor Driscoll. Go on, please.
Yeah. Thanks, Kieran. If we're like comparing ourselves to other authorities, those sort of good news stories where actually, if we seem to be getting more contributions and more engagements, I think that should be said, so that people people are taking part in things and they are contributing, and it is going forward. So I think that should be part of the story when we're reporting back. But one of my fears often about a lot of the council's work is that there's a consultation and it's always fed back as a massive report, and we don't always feed back in digestible amounts. I mean, the LTMs are a prime example where we had a massive report, but very little in between, a massive interim report, and very little to the actual final massive report. And I think we always see our consultations as being a final outcome that then gets produced, but making sure people get information as it's going along might encourage engagement, might encourage that participation and a bit more feedback and information. So we're not just keeping saying, give us your answers in a survey, but we need to think about, rather than just keeping asking, how we're going to actually entice people and encourage people to participate a bit more. And I was pleased to hear about that increased functionality in terms of translation to 9 community languages. So I'd be interested from Shamake about if that's been used, or if he's got any experience about user involvement with that. And equally from the council's point, how we're telling people that this functionality is there and it's improving. Because I think that's really important, that people get to know that that's what they would normally perceive as not being there, hasn't been there for years, but now is actually being introduced. That would be great to see if that was actually publicised and promoted and targeted. Because we have been, the report mentions about doing some targeted work for young people, going to sixth form colleges and engaging with young people that way, which is great to see. But often I think we shouldn't be frightened of saying that we're going to engage in different ways. The Ward Forum have a role in some areas, more than others perhaps, but there might be other ways of delivering, and be quite open about, we might be going to sixth form colleges and doing a meeting in CHE, for example, to discuss a certain aspect and linking it in with the curriculum. That could be perfectly valid. We might be going to community centres or to other groups or residents associations because there's particular issues and things. That targeted engagement is perfectly valid as well. But I think we should have that suite of options available and be quite open about those. So it's not always the Ward Forum, and it's not always an online survey, and it's not always a paper survey or whatever, but to make sure that we can actually say, this is a range of options and we're going to pick from this menu to make sure that we meet our needs for the topic at hand. One of the things about people might not be aware of is like highways. I was on a site visit with the highways officer, and the highways officer was actually relating back to me as a ward councillor various comments and saying how they were impacting and what they were commenting on and what they were related to very directly. But the residents weren't around to hear that. But I was really appreciative of knowing that the officers had taken those comments on board. I'd considered them carefully. They'd dropped part of the proposals, they'd kept others. They were explaining to me how the proposals are linked together. So if you have one part of the highways development, you need another part, and you can maybe take both out. But given that feedback to those people who contributed, I think is really important. And in this day and age, if we're online, in that case, feedback was available, that we need to package that response to them so people think, well, actually, my thoughts and ideas were engaged, because there was a summary that officers produce regularly in highways for their consultations, which often happens in other areas as well, and officers' reports and responses, but that tends to just go into the procedural work of the council rather than being then emailed back out to people and saying, well, this is what the response is. And I think it would encourage a bit more dialogue, and people know that they're being engaged and being thought about. So there's a couple of points there. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Councillor Driscoll. Again, you made very, very important points. Yeah, I mean, it's common. I have observed that, you know, whenever there is a planning application or there is a parking consultation, we don't tend to see involvement from areas like Southall and BAME community. So this is where the council has to make this accessible to all these communities, to make sure that we are listening to more people and more residents in Ealing are actually involved in council's decision-making process. So just wanted to ask if there is any more question or comment. I can see Sharameke has raised his hand. Is this a legacy hand, or do you want to have some comments? Yes?
Yeah, because Andrew, Paul Driscoll, he spoke about, for example, stuff around digital, and also Councillor, I'm trying to get used to the name, Julian Gallant. Also, he mentioned a few things. I think, so for example, with digital champions, which I think is an amazing, we've got actually feedback we can give to Kieran and others. It's actually working. It's a very good system. We piloted this system 2015, so working closely with the South Community Alliance and what used to be called the Acton Forum. So we had about 25 digital champions. GoSed has been a UK online center for the past, I would say, almost 11, 12 years. And over that time, we moved almost 2,000 people who were digitally excluded. So organizations like ours and others, we have actually solutions. So for example, when you talk about translating things into different languages, we know it costs money, but there's ways of doing that. So one of the ways is, you know, we have come up with courses, English courses, pre-entry English, embedded in digital learning, where actually we have people who maybe the English is not very strong, but digitally they get stronger. So solutions are there, and you know, it's workable. So one of the when it comes to councillors and what councillors, actually with Julian, it wasn't saying that councillors are not actually doing their work, but it's more that you can imagine most of the kind of user being most of the communities come from countries where they're not given opportunities to participate in civic engagement. So I think in this country we've got a perfect system to actually tell people, come and talk to us. It's not just about your votes. Let's engage with you. Let's involve you in what we do. So I think there's a huge chance there. But so people are coming already with that kind of fear about the system, about authority, and I think we need to break that. So what I think Councillor Driscoll has got some great ideas. So one time we were doing a project on knife crime. This is through the Home Office, and we had pop-up events in different parts of the council. So we just happened to be in front of the council once, and then we got approached by one councillor. And from that, actually, we went to do a presentation to the Walpole ward. And we thought that's an amazing initiative. I mean, it's an amazing kind of idea because we're able to feed into, and the councillors are able to ask questions. So I think there's ways, and also just come back to the last point about dress code in terms of feedback. I mean, as organizations that deliver different projects, we don't just get feedback from our users and leave it to that end. We actually, come back to them, verify what we have, see if they still agree with that, and then we move forward, because we know people have been surveyed to death, and it's not just about doing the consultation and coming up with a report and say, okay, this is what people said, and we're going to go with it. Just an example with the race equality kind of report. I mean, I was part of the people that were asked to give some kind of information. But I was a bit disappointed because that information didn't come back to us for us to verify things before it became published. We just found out it's kind of being launched. I think the website was already put up. So where do we actually point out if something is not what we discussed, for example? So we were quite disappointed about that. And of course, we don't want to do a kind of a critique of what's been done, because we think it's a very good step. So it's almost like a compromise. So I think we should not just do consultation or service for the sake of it. Just lastly for me, so when the council was consulting on the tenancies for council kind of tenants, we thought it wasn't really done the way we thought it should be done. We ended up actually taking on a lot of work explaining to residents, because residents were worried that, oh, I might lose my property, so we always pick up the pieces. And unfortunately, of course, if you look at, for example, most of our funding comes from outside the borough. And I think also we think councillors who are based where some of these organizations are based, they should actually engage with those. I mean, it's mostly also almost at their doorsteps. And this organization engage with so many residents who are always at crisis all the time. And we never see any councillors coming to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Driscoll, you raise your hand.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks, Shamake, for coming back and giving that sort of very tangible example of the work that you've done, and obviously sort of really leading the way with digital champions and all the other activities. So that's really great to see. So thank you for all of that feedback. I just wanted to also raise the issue about thriving communities. That was work that was being done pre-pandemic. And it's kind of, well, understandably, due to COVID, it was all paused and never really sort of went further. But there was an idea and thoughts about delivering engagement differently then. But where is that work now, and what's happening with it? Is it morphing into something else, or has it just been parked and it's now just that it's no longer ticking over, it's just with the keys taken out of the ignition, as it were? So anything that officers can come back and add to that would be really helpful to understand what's happened to that work. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And I will invite officers to come back to this question, please.
Sorry, Councillor, just finding it tricky to unmute. Councillor Driscoll, on your question, so I think I mentioned at the top, obviously, that the council plan had set out that vision of being kind of open, transparent, inclusive. So I think that really is what the next iteration of those aspirations around thriving communities, isn't it? What we've been talking about here today, how the council can move on and put whether it's digital, whether it's face-to-face, engagement with residents, understanding with communities, co-production with communities, where that adds value at the heart of the way it works. So very much still the at the heart of our work, and we're very much expecting, I think, that to continue to be sort of part of our agenda going forwards. Obviously, the recruitment is happening at the moment for the chief executive, permanent chief executive of the council, I'm sure a number of members will have watched some of the promotional material. Trying to embed that in communities was at the heart of the approach to attract the right person to lead the council, and I'm sure will be a big part of our sort of change and development agenda going forward. Obviously, right, as you rightly say, COVID, I think, has disrupted some of our plans, and obviously we're in a slightly, we're very close now to the election. So in terms of setting out, new proposals, that's probably something that would happen into the new administration, I would think. But certainly very much part of our internal discussion, and obviously got that kind of priority hook in the council plan, our key document. So I think that's the short answer. If Joanna wants to add anything, obviously she may wish to do so.
Sorry, I'm not hearing most of the question, but I just kind of it's not that nothing is happening. Lots of thinking is happening about how to develop, as I think you suggested, a suite of different methods of doing this. So not just coming up with kind of one way of doing it at all. So that work and that thinking is being developed now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more comments or feedback from the panelists? Panel members? No? Any recommendation or suggestion?
It's Shamake.
Yeah.
Hi. Sorry, I didn't want to talk too much, but I think it's an opportunity.
That's why we are here. We're listening to the residents of Ealing. Go on.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I think it's we are seeing the council changing, and I think that's very positive. And I think, as I said, this is the right time to do as much as we can as a council. I mean, as a kind of collective, and it's just that when, for example, GOSA, the other organizations maybe say things about the council, is not an attack to the council. It's actually, just as an example, for the last 3 years, we've raised almost 270 complaints against some decisions by council in different areas. And because you have to advocate for people, because sometimes people don't understand things or things happen to them. And for some people, it's kind of life changing. We've had people actually have lost their lives because of a lot of things that's happened to them. So I think I'll commend the council for taking these steps, and also for what the commission has done, the Race Equality Commission. And I hope that there'll be more kind of engagement, not only with the civil society organizations, but you have a lot of residents, and I'll say, for example, a lot of young people in Ealing who want to engage. And I think, I hope, as we go forward, we work together.
Okay, thank you so much. And I quickly move on to Councillor Brett.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I'm on a phone, so my camera's not really working very well. But I think some of the stuff that has been said is very positive, in the sense that there are community groups that are really interested in engaging with Ealing Council. And I think going back to what the previous speaker just said, is the fact that it's not a criticism, more of a I suppose a balanced view on how things are being done and how things could be being done. And so from my perspective, yes, there's a lot of learnings from this, from this meeting, and also from the different reports that have been publicised tonight. But also, I think as councillors, how we engage, and also as a council how we engage. And I think we can kind of tick boxes around communication, and Facebook, and we've done this and we've done that and whatever. But I think that potentially it's not necessarily cutting through in certain communities. So it's actually kind of really engaging with those communities and understanding what needs they want and how they want to be communicated to in order for us to be a little bit more successful than potentially we are now, right now.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think a lot of residents are asking these questions, and we also get this in email. When would the council start its ward forums? And as we know that due to COVID, council has not been able to organize these ones, but obviously we are getting back to normality. So I'm sure sooner or later we will resume some form of ward forums. But this is an opportunity for us to discuss and give some ideas on how we can make ward forums more effective than it is at the moment. And obviously some councils have already had online Zoom meetings, which has been very productive, and it has increased participation. But as the issue has been raised, that there are lots of residents who feel digitally excluded, and obviously the language is barrier, the technology is barrier. So we will have to take that into consideration as well, that if we have to explore alternative of ward forum, what could it be, and how we can engage the residents, how they can connect with councillors through the ward forums and different channels, and obviously the council services. So I can see lots of hands raising in the last minute. I will quickly go to the person who has not spoken before, Kay.
Yeah, I was just going to say on ward forums specifically, that, and I think this is true of communication channels in general, that if people experience something and they don't relate to it, then they stop going, or it doesn't deliver what they're looking for. And I think specifically with ward forums, my experience in my area is that the whole agenda is set by councillors, and there's never any time to discuss the items that residents would like to discuss. So there's perhaps an argument for, finding out what it is that residents would like to talk about and allow them to talk about it so that the councillors are listening rather than telling. That's the point.
Thank you. Very good point. Okay, Councillor Galland, quickly have your contribution.
Thank you, Shoma Kay, and thank you, Kay. I beg your pardon. Just start with video. Thank you, Kay. Thank you, Shoma Kay. Keep on criticising. Okay, it's the only way that we know what needs to happen, and that's your feedback, and we're grateful for it. And I think you've hit it, Shoma Kay. You hit it on the head. The council needs to develop its profile as a friend and not as an authority.
Okay, thank you very much. And last contribution from Councillor Driscoll.
Yeah, I think in terms of ward forum, however they are constituted in the future, I think they should still have some ability and funding attached to them. The report recognises that individually in the ward, it's a relatively small amount of money, but collectively across the borough, it's quite significant. But often those small pots of money for a ward in a small area could be quite significant. So I think making sure there's still some financial budget that's attached to ward forums and whatever guise they're there is really important. Just to help Kay with her response to that, I know often we set our agenda according to what emails we've had about issues that have been raised in the ward forum that I am involved in Northfields. So it's not sent in isolation, just to help you when the agenda's planned. Often it's because we've had a lot of correspondence about an issue that then it goes on the agenda. So there is that sort of dialogue that happens beforehand. It was good to hear Joanna saying that that suite of options or menu options for engagement is being considered. But I think that should be part of that we don't just do, there's an online survey and that's it. But each consultation, and when we're looking at the larger consultations for around shaping healing, for example, has some targeted aspect for key groups. So whether it's young people, whether it's BAME communities, whether it's certain geographies in the borough, which are less likely to participate, that we have some aspect of activity that will feed into that, just rather than just one survey online and thinking job done. So having that multidisciplinary approach, I think, is definitely to be welcomed and going forward. So there's my 2 recommendations there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor Driscoll. Any other recommendation or suggestion? I can see 2 hands. Councillor Brett, is it still legacy hand or new question or suggestion? Okay, fine. Right, okay, so you can always email me and officers if you have any more recommendation and suggestion. So thank you very much for all your contribution and presentation and asking those important questions. I'll now move on to the next item, which is the panel's work program, and I will invite Harjeet Benz to present this item.
Yes, Chair, in Appendix 1, we've got the panel's work program, and the last meeting is on the 26th of April, where the panel is expected to look at its draft final report.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you very much. So we are heading to our last meeting, and tonight's meeting we are just about to conclude. So the next meeting would be on 26th of April. Like Harjeet Ben just explained, that will be obviously to conclude everything and to finalize all our recommendation and suggestion that we have been discussing throughout this resident engagement panel. So thank you, everyone.
Just before you go, sorry,
yes,
sorry to interrupt you there. Just to say, often it would be really helpful for the final meeting if any recommendations come in advance, and they could be even circulated as a briefing note. It's just helpful, then we've got a list of written recommendations that are easier to review rather than people contributing at the spur of the moment on that final report. So I would encourage all members to try and get something a bit in advance, and it can be circulated as a briefing note, because then it would be helpful for the debate and discussion.
Yes, certainly. Yes, please do send your recommendation by email so that we have them in time. Okay, thank you very much. So the next meeting, and this is going to be our last meeting of this resident engagement panel, going to be on 26th of April. So you look after yourself, and I will thank again everybody, officers, and all the participants, presenters. Have a very lovely evening. Good night.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.